Well, it is a significant departure from what much of his base expected, and that's we know the Democrats are going to oppose it because they don't have a national security policy. But the isolationists and the Republican Party, led by his own vice president, are, as the president might say, discombobulated by what he's just done. So he is putting a lot of his future reputation at stake here. There's no doubt about it.
Hello and welcome to the Middle East Report, your one-stop shop for all the news coming out of the region, and I'm your host, Ali Razamanji. The US-Israeli war with Iran has entered its fifth day. In the last few hours, the Israelis have said they've attacked the headquarters in Tehran. The Americans have just sunk a warship. Let's speak to Ambassador John Bolton, who was Donald Trump's national security advisor in his first term. Hello to you.
Hi, glad to be with you.
Your history is one of you've long called for regime change in Iran, so I assume you're happy about the events in the last few days.
Well, I think the objectives are entirely correct, and I think the military part of this is off to a good start. I'm concerned about aspects of it. I don't think Trump has laid the groundwork with the American people to justify what I think is a very strong case for regime change. I'm worried he's not consulted adequately with Congress or with allies, and I'm worried that he hasn't consulted effectively with the opposition itself inside Iran. He's changed a little bit on that last point, speaking with Kurdish leaders Barzani and Talabani, Iraqi Kurdish leaders, but obviously they're in close touch with their fellow Kurds inside northwest Iran. And all of these problems are correctable, but time is running, and they need to be corrected quickly.
You made the case about, having not going unilaterally, and that's something that we remember from Iraq, actually. The US tried to build an alliance around this. It didn't try as much around this. And obviously now the US is trying to make a case. What do you understand the war aims to be in some ways? Because President Trump says regime change. His Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says something different. It's hard to understand what the achievable aim here is.
Well, I think it is regime change. It has to be. The argument for doing that is that the regime is never going to give up its objective of obtaining strategic nuclear weapons and engaging in international terror. That is the essence of the regime. And you can pretend that that's not the case, in which case you just have to deal with these problems forever. So the choice is, do you want to solve the problems or do you want to massage the problems? I think regime change is the way to go. It has been for me for over 20 years, and it's better late than never. In terms of the allies, Europe faces the threat of terrorism from Iran just as the U.S. does, and it's Europe that's within range of Iran's intermediate range ballistic missile capabilities. So I think they should stand up and join with us. The Gulf Arabs, I think, want regime change. They didn't want to. They wanted a way to do it without conflict. I understand that that was impossible. I think now they're going to join with the U.S. and Israel because basically they see the strategic environment the same way we do.
Yeah, I mean, the Gulf Arabs clearly have actually reached a point where the Qatari defense spokesperson actually was saying that, this is a red line that's been crossed. Do you see the Gulf states basically joining in now in some ways? Because there was an element of Iran internationalizing the conflict, I suppose, maybe trying to deliver build up an alliance against America. That doesn't seem to have worked.
Well, look, in terms of the Gulf Arabs, if Iran had focused its attacks on American bases, they might have been able to keep the Gulf states out, but instead they attacked civilian targets in all of them, civilian targets. So they shouldn't be surprised. I think it's a complete catastrophe for the Iranian regime, but that's fine with me. The Iranians can expect basically no help from Russia or China. I think they're on their own. They sent their foreign minister around the world on a tin cup exercise. He hasn't come up with anything. But so far for the U.S., the countries that have backed us explicitly are Canada, Australia, New Zealand. You may see a pattern there. We're waiting for Keir Starmer to do the same. It'd be nice if Europe stood up generally.
Yeah, Keir Starmer is interesting because President Trump yesterday said he's no Winston Churchill, which I imagine Sir Keir took that quite personally. I think, is there an element of Britain not joining? And what do you make of that, actually? Because, in the UK, it's played well reasonably with public opinion here.
Well, the decision not to allow U.S. forces to take off from RAF bases, I think, was a big mistake. And now among other countries that Iran has attacked is the British base at Akrotiri on the island of Cyprus. And I say that advisedly because the base is on what's called a sovereign base area. When Cyprus was granted independence, Britain kept two such sovereign base areas. So they have attacked the territory of the United Kingdom. That gives you a right of self-defense. There's absolutely no reason here except just bizarre theories of international law that are holding Starmer back. And I expect in the UK, maybe not within the Labour Party, and maybe Jeremy Corbyn won't attack him, but plenty of other people from the Conservative Party and the Reform Party will attack him.
Yeah, I mean, do you think there's an element of cowardice to this? So the UK in the last few hours has said they're deploying HMS Dragon next week, a 45 type destroyer to Cyprus, but it'll take 2 weeks to get there. And in fact, I've recently learned that it's the first time Britain won't have a presence in the Mediterranean since 1799. Do you think there's an element of cowardice and Britain's place in the world at risk here?
Well, I wouldn't say that. What I would say for the West as a whole is, and particularly Europe as a whole, is that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, people thought it was the end of history. We didn't need big militaries. We were going to have a peace dividend. Defense budgets were cut, including in the United States. We're still behind where we should be. Europe is way behind where they should be. And this is a global conflict. You know, Iran's best hopes were from China and Russia, countries that Europe needs to, they pay attention to Russia because of the invasion of Ukraine, but they still look to China as nothing but a trading partner. I don't think actually Russia or China are going to do much for Iran, it's just I wonder what's going on in the Europeans' mind. They think the world just consists of the European continent. That is a kind of isolationism. It's not cowardice necessarily, but it's a very short-sighted view of the world.
And then there is the question of, I think part of what the government's view is here, that it's hard to inflict regime change from 36,000 feet. So, I mean, do you accept that view? Because there's an element of this now, and maybe I'm putting something to you, but is Donald Trump's future now tied in some ways to the success of this operation?
Well, it's certainly the most consequential decision he's made as president. We're in a midterm election year where things already didn't look so well for Republicans, so a lot rides on him being successful, which is why I'm trying to encourage him to correct these mistakes that he's been making. And the idea is not just that regime change will occur because of these attacks, although what the Israelis are doing, focusing on top leadership members, is having a very dramatic effect of reducing the number of people who can be supreme leader or can hold the regime together. But what the U.S. is doing, and Israel is too, is attacking the instruments of Iranian state power that threaten the U.S. and its friends and allies like the Gulf Arabs and Israel, and that simultaneously repress the Iranian people. This is mainly the Revolutionary Guard, the Quds Force, the besieging militia. And by degrading the instruments of state power, by systematically dismantling the Revolutionary Guard, we are showing to remaining leaders in the regime and to the opposition that the regime can't protect itself. And a regime that can't protect itself is a regime whose days are numbered. And as it becomes clearer that the regime's days are numbered, you will get defections out of the regime. The opposition will be able to talk to people and say, you really want to go down with this sinking ship? That's how it's going to happen. It requires an active role by the Iranian opposition, which is why another point of failure is we're not coordinating effectively enough with them, or at least I fear we're not. We should have, again, begun this months ago, not too late now. And you saw yesterday the call with the Kurdish leaders. So this is something that needs to be accelerated, but it's not the idea we're just going to pound them and somebody will call Washington and say we surrender. I don't see it ending that way. I see the regime fragmenting at the top and disintegrating.
Two final questions, because I know you're short on time today. Would you consider this the biggest gamble of the Trump presidency insofar as his future is tied to it? In the same way, we're expecting a larger batch of Epstein files to come out later this week, right? Is there an element of his future now tied to these two actions?
Well, it is a significant departure from what much of his base expected, and that's we know the Democrats are going to oppose it because they don't have a national security policy. But the isolationist and the Republican Party, led by his own vice president, are, as the president might say, discombobulated by what he's just done. So he is putting a lot of his future reputation at stake here. There's no doubt about it.
One final thing is, and I appreciate you've got a sort of strategic mind to be able to analyze this. I read in the Financial Times some of the operation that took out the Ayatollah was something that they had hacked, the Israelis had hacked through Tehran's infrastructure, essentially learning the mundanities of life in Tehran to understand who the bodyguards are. That's the kind of operation that takes almost years of planning. Is that fair to say?
Well, I give kudos to Israeli intelligence. They've done things beginning with uh, bringing away much of the nuclear archive from Iran, from Tehran in 2018. I mean, Hollywood ought to be making movies about this, and our CIA could use some assistance from Mossad advisors. But this is also part of the war of the future, hacking into the street light system so they can watch what's going on. This is the future we all need to protect against because you can bet the Chinese are watching it.
And just finally, in where this goes, how do you see this playing out now in the next few weeks, the next few months? I mean, we don't know how long it's really going to go on for. And do you see maybe, is there any opportunity in your mind, this new person, Mujtaba Khamenei, the son of the Ayatollah, who seems to be taking over, would that be an opportunity to create peace? Or in this case, if you've gone in, you've got to secure, in your view, regime change?
Well, Trump will talk to anybody, anytime, any place, and it's a risk. The son, I think, is a very controversial choice if he's eventually picked. I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him, but who knows what Donald Trump would do.
Ambassador John Bolton, thanks for your time.
Thank you.